paradigm of sovereignty and ideological lensing for the building of black power makes Pan-Africanism really a stillborn child that we cannot continue agonizing ourselves with, carrying around instead of burying. We should have the serenity. What am I saying? Wow, what are you saying about Pan-Africanism? I know the most radical of you would flare at what I've just said. Yes, Pan-Africanism, a stillborn child we must be serene about burying. And I'm putting, to you all that Pan-Africanism is a non-starter political philosophy, having been conceptualized by Africans whose minds were pervaded by Marxism, Christianity, atheism, and any other non-African worldview, intellectual tradition, you can think of. These things had the minds of people who conceptualized and coined what is called Pan-Africanism, plagued with, dislocation. And what does that make of Pan-Africanism? What does that make of it? So this points to a hazard of us landing on a destiny that is relative to the paradigmatic dislocation, compromised from inception, intellectual DNA to this philosophy that is called Pan-Africanism. And that is why within the Pan-Africanist ideological framework, a latitude is given for Pan-Africanist Marxists, Pan-Africanist Christians, Pan-Africanist Arabists, Pan-Africanist Hebrew Israelites, Pan-Africanist, non-Africans, like Arabs and East Indians. All of, these absurdities, these somewhat oxymoronic things that I am pointing out are in the rendezvous you call Pan-Africanism, and have mistakenly taken for a liberation ideology. So this is a stillborn child. Pan-Africanism is a stillborn child we have been carrying around for so long. So let's bury it and give birth to an epistemology, a way of knowing, of African liberation that gives the impetus for the building of black power as our struggles output end, and not the colorless humanistic world of deceit that your fathers of Pan-Africanism envisioned. So mine is simply an honest reading of history. It's simply that. So what came to be coined as Pan-Africanism had a conceptual framework that guided those who coined the term. So Pan-Africanism, or what in history has been called such, did not predate these religious and intellectual traditions of dislocation that I had alluded to earlier, pervading the minds of those who conceptualized behind and coined the term Pan-Africanism. So to stretch this term backwards, as is often the practice, of most revisionists, any attempt to stretch it backward in history, to separate it from, the philosophical outlook that formed the basis of thought that went into conceptualizing for it, is clearly to really dehistoricize the term, or rather falsify history, because you are now applying the term to things having no historical markers of its origin and evolution as a concept, to things that do not, accurately represent it. This is sheer dishonesty. It is sheer dishonesty. And you can't take from, the African history incidents of the show of African unity and ascribe that to Pan-Africanism. Every incident of Africans in history where there was a show of unity, then you call that Pan-Africanism. No, Pan-Africanism was coined by someone who conceptualized behind the term itself. And the term came to be representative of that person's ideological cartography. So to speak of Pan-Africanism outside of that is to really dishonestly revising history. You are dishonestly revising history. So Pan-Africanism does not simply mean African unity or all Africans coming together. It doesn't simply mean that. It has attendant intellectual baggage that pervaded the thoughts of those who started it, who started in history a movement that they called Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism cannot be anything outside of that. It can't be. So African Marxist elites, they called themselves Pan-Africanists. The first people to call themselves Pan-Africanists. That's a historical fact. So you're not going to engage in that dishonest revisionism of tying African-centeredness to Pan-Africanism in its decenteredness when you look at its inceptional reality. So the rest can really be wishology, sheer wishology. So true Pan-Africanists, in accord with Pan-Africanism's inceptional reality, an expression borrowed by my brother Akufena Jeremiah Donald, known on Facebook as Jeremiah Africa Before Colonization. So this expression, inceptional reality, I'm borrowing it from him, in both of us engaging in penetratively and dissectively looking at Pan-Africanism through a magnifying glass to see through these obscurities that often bypass the critical thinking of most. So Pan-Africanism, this is what I call its conceptual DNA. It cannot be separated, from it, except fictitiously. So these your forefathers, ideologically, I'm talking to you, Pan-Africanists. These were race-neutral, humanist reformists, who sought collaboration with and an appeal, to our race enemies' moral conscience. They were not race-centered, cultural, African cultural, revolutionaries and warriors fighting for African liberation, for the building of black power sovereignty for Africans. They were not. for Africans alone.